Thank you all for joining us. Over the past year in this committee, we've talked about what housing looks like in this country. Before last year, this committee it's called the Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs Committee. It was far too much about banking and Wall Street and far too little about issues that matter to people's lives, particularly housing. We have changed that. We've talked about how hard it is for people to find a home where they can afford the rent, leaving 1 in 4 renters paying over their half their income every month for housing, and that was before the pandemic. We talked about the long, shameful legacy of racial discrimination from black codes and slavery to Jim Crow and redlining, how that shameful legacy has affected renters and aspiring homeowners even today. We talked about the unique challenges facing rural renters and homeowners trying to find a safe, affordable place to raise a family or to grow old in their communities. Housing determines so much, as you all know, about our lives. It determines whether our children will be exposed to dangerous lead paint, how long we'll have to commute every day to work, where our children go to school, how close grocery stores with healthy food are available. Then last October, this committee discussed a problem we'll hear from renters here today. More and more wealthy, deep-pocket investors are buying up the homes that serve as the foundation for families' lives. They see these buildings as nothing more than annual return on equity. These out-of-town, maybe even out-of-country investors are raising rents, sometimes 50%, issuing eviction notices, leaving toxic mold and pest infestations to grow worse, all in the name of their own profit, their own bottom line. And as affordable apartments and houses and manufactured home communities become harder and harder to find, families with nowhere else to go are left with an impossible choice. Pay money they don't have for a home that may put their kids at risk, or risk having nowhere to sleep at night. Then when families are priced out, or when buildings are in such bad shape that they're maybe even uninhabitable, it's our community's leaders, mayors, city council members, ultimately taxpayers, who are left to clean up the mess. Today, we'll hear from renters across the country, 7 of you, representing all kinds of communities, who will remind us that housing is not just a line on a balance sheet or a paragraph in a business perspective. These are people's homes. They're the homes of teachers and healthcare workers, of mothers and grandfathers. They're the homes we hope to raise our children and grandchildren without having to worry about their health or about whether they'll have to choose between rent and food. The residents we'll hear from today show this is a national problem. They're from all across the country: Montana, Maryland, Minnesota, Nevada, all over the country. They live in single family homes. They live in manufactured home communities and apartment buildings, but they all have one thing in common. Investors see their homes as nothing more than an opportunity to squeeze out a little more profit, no matter what the cost to people living there. Our speakers represent the experience of millions of residents who obviously can't be here also. Their stories are often overlooked by the investors who take their rent. We need to hear those stories. We need to hear what our family and friends and neighbors face each day, so that we can tackle our housing challenges in a way that will benefit not primarily Wall Street, but that will benefit renters and homeowners and people in our communities. I'll introduce each of our panelists today, each of our speakers, and then we'll start with Ms. Hernandez to speak. Kathleen Hernandez is from Las Vegas. She's a steering committee member of Renters Rising, a national tenant association. Ms. Hernandez, thank you for being here. Rachel Jones lives in North Minneapolis, is a working mom of 2 young children. Cindy Newman comes from Great Falls, Montana. She's lived for 20 years in a manufactured housing community that was recently acquired by a corporate owner. Juan Cuellar lives with his wife and 3 children in Hyattsville, Maryland. He's joined by Mr. Trent Leon Learman, who will be interpreting from Spanish to English as translator. Debbie Nunez is a mother and lifelong resident tenant in Lower Nob Hill area of San Francisco. Stephen Frischmuth lives in Austin, Texas, where he rents in a property owned by a corporate owner. And last, not least, of course, is Antoine Nguyen. Antoine Nguyen is a tenant leader in Brooklyn with the Greenbrook Tenants Coalition. So each of you, there will be no questions from any of our panel, from any of the senators. We want to hear from you. I appreciate many senators are watching this remote. and they're watching this with their cameras off, but some of us are watching with our cameras on. I will just call on each one of you and start with Ms. Hernandez. And thank you for joining us, and the floor is yours. Thanks, Ms. Nunez. Thank you, Ms. Hernandez.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kathleen Hernandez, and I do live in Las Vegas, Nevada. I'd like to take the time to thank you for the opportunity to testify today. As stated, I am a member of Make the Road Nevada, an affiliate of the Center for Popular Democracy. I am also a member of the Steering Committee for Renters Rising, which is a national association of renters who live in corporate-owned properties. I joined Make the Road Nevada and Renters Rising to transform the unequal housing system in our country so everyone has a home to thrive in. I'm speaking today not only as a renter who has faced horrible conditions living in a house owned by Progress Residential, but also as a leader in the movement to end corporate control of housing. And this is my story. In the June of 2020, I, along with my fiance and his family, moved into a 5-bedroom house owned by Progress Residential. About a month after moving in, the downstairs toilet overflowed twice. A month later, we noticed foul-smelling, clouded, dirty water spilling into our front yard from a capped pipe sticking out of the ground. We realized this was wastewater when we noticed toilet paper flowing out of the pipe as well. At first, we would only pull around the pipe, but the last 2 times this has happened, it flowed out into the yard and down the sidewalk. We noticed Progress. We contacted Progress to see if we could have someone fix this issue, and were told that they would charge us a service fee that was higher than the cost of hiring our own technician. Unfortunately, the first technician we called couldn't figure out what the issue was, but he did snake the pipes, and the toilet was working again for a little while. After another month, and this is 3 months after we moved in, the toilet broke down again. This time, the technician we called told us there were roots in the pipes and that they were the cause of the toilet backing up and water overflowing in the yard. My brother-in-law called Progress to tell them what the technician had said, but they never called us back, and this problem has only gotten worse. We've had to deal with this at least 4 times. Each time we try calling them, emailing them, or submitting service tickets, but every time they want to charge us hundreds of dollars just to send out a technician to look at the issue, even though in our contract it states large issues will be the responsibility of the rental company. The last time we had to deal with this issue was during the fall of 2021, when not only did the wastewater spill out into our front yard and down the sidewalk as previously stated, but the toilet flooded our downstairs entrance and spilled out from underneath our front door. We've avoided using that bathroom as much as possible. My family and I deserve to live in a home that is safe and clean. We deserve a property manager who is committed to keeping properties in good repair and not just squeezing the last dime out of tenants while providing substandard hazardous living conditions, because that is a biohazard. I know that I'm not alone and that thousands of tenants have faced similar and worse problems with Progress Residential across the country. The CEO of Progress, Don Mullen, was in part responsible for the foreclosure crisis and has continued to earn his living by cheating families out of the right to live in safe, affordable housing. We need real protections for tenants in Las Vegas, in the state of Nevada, and all across the country. We want you all, as the Senate Banking and Housing Committee, to take all the measures you can to protect tenants living in corporate-owned properties. We need greater transparency on who these corporate landlords are and what they own. We need tenant protections like rent control, protection against evictions without good cause, and right to counsel. We need warranty of habitability for everyone and ways to hold landlords accountable for decreased services. And we need social housing to create alternatives to housing as a commodity, because housing is a human right. I am organizing for everyone to have a home to thrive in, and I hope my story illuminates just why that is so necessary for all tenants across the country. Once again, I'd like to take the time to thank you for the opportunity to share my experiences, and I look forward to seeing what actions you all take in the near future.
And your words are really important. Thank you, and thank you for your work with Renters Rising as the National Tenant Association we were talking about earlier. Thank you so much. Rachel Jones has joined us from Minneapolis. Your Senator Tina Smith is on the screen too, and Ms. Jones, thanks for being here and telling us your story. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you for having me. My name is Rachel Jones, and I am a single mom of 2 young kids. I rent in North Minneapolis, and I am also a board member of Inquilinos Unidos, otherwise known as Renters United. They have helped essentially take down 2 very large slumlords in the Minneapolis area. So my story begins with Havenbrook, which is an entity of Pretium. I started renting from them 3 years ago exactly. I was getting out of an abusive relationship. I had an 18-month-old and I was pregnant, and I was desperate. I had no job, no money. I was incredibly fortunate to have a mother who was able to loan me some money to at least put down a deposit, pay first month's rent. I came across a Havenbrook single family home in that time that was just, it was going to be good enough because I needed to get out of the situation I was in. Um, Upon renting the home, well, even before signing the lease, there was no shelving in the cupboards, and the Havenbrook leasing agent essentially said, go to Home Depot, get some wood cut, build your own shelves. And because I was so desperate to just be in my own home, I went with that. I did that. And as time went on, I noticed that Havenbrook was not going to be responsive in any way to any of my needs. There was a very dilapidated garage in the back of the home, albeit it was advertised that the home came with a working, not dilapidated garage. And that ensued a 2-year-long fight over me paying for the garage that wasn't actually functional or even safe for me to park my car in or have anything in. They did eventually tear down the garage because the city of Minneapolis got involved. But when they came to tear down the garage, they didn't notify me. So I could have had things in there. I could have personally been in there. But that's typically how it goes with Havenbrook. The worst, though, with them, albeit I've had millions of issues, it feels like, was when the first spring I was there, the basement flooded. There were several inches of standing water on the basement floor. Per Havenbrook lease, in a basement, you need to have a dehumidifier running. The cord cannot go along the ground. That plugs into the wall. They are the ones who installed the dehumidifier, and they did not install it per their own instructions. So when all of the flooding occurred, there was an electrical cord from that dehumidifier under the water. I called and called and called and could not get through to anyone for hours. I eventually reached the corporate office and told them of the emergent need for maintenance assistance, and that there was a live electrical cord running in the flooded basement. And they told me I could go shut off the electricity. Well, to do that, I would have to wade through the water. They told me I could do that or I could just wait. So essentially, risk your life or just wait and hopefully the water goes away. They did finally send someone out about a week later, and all they did, at that point, most of the water had dissipated, and all that person did was put another dehumidifier down in there. There was no action taken to help prevent the flooding, such as fixing some of the basement walls and putting gutters on the house, which I did end up fighting for after that first spring. Everything is a fight with them, and it always has been. I've talked to other renters who have had worse issues than I feel that I have, and it is a constant battle. And that's only if you can get through to someone at Havenbrook. So my understanding is that in January of 2020, Havenbrook was bought by Pretium, and Don Mullen is the CEO of Pretium. And it is essentially a money grabbing tool. That's all that they are doing. They are targeting the lower socioeconomic class to grab money. When my rent went up by hundreds of dollars last year, I asked a representative from Havenbrook, why is it going up so much? I have faithfully paid my rent. I have done everything you have asked me to do and more. And you're still going to every year charge me hundreds of more dollars. She said, we have to please the investors. And it was shortly after that that I really started to get into the fight with my group here in Colinas Unidos. I was already a part of the group, but after that statement from the Haven Work representative, I knew that I had a voice and I was going to scream as loud as I could, because we're all human beings and we all deserve dignified housing. Thank you again for your time. I really appreciate the opportunity for being here.
That probably runs through all these. Senator Cortez Mastow's joined us. Ms. Hernandez had just told her story, and so thank you. And Ms. Jones, thank you. Cindy Newman is from Great Falls, Montana. Her Senator Tester, is also on the call. So Ms. Newman, please tell us your story. Thank you.
Okay, and thank you, Senator Brown, for giving us this opportunity. I live in the Highwoods in Great Falls, Montana, and I'd like to tell you a little bit about my neighbors and friends, people who choose to live in manufactured homes. In the Highwoods, 80% of us are seniors. Many have downsized from big yards and multiple floors, empty nesters in some cases, making a simpler lifetime and planning ahead for the more modest means of retirement. On my street, 7 of 10 are single-income homes, and 1 in 3 includes a person with a disability. Most of us are on fixed income and just cannot absorb these big rent increases. 21 years ago, I bought a manufactured home and moved it to the Highwoods because it was beautiful and well-maintained. We had a fair landowner who kept our community safe and affordable. In just 2 years, Haven Park Capital has bought 7 parks in Montana, affecting the lives of over 1,800 families. They are a Utah-based private equity group who have rebranded themselves as the saviors of affordable housing. But their business model is clear. They tell their investors that buying manufactured home communities is a way to make large, consistent, fast profits that exploits our inability to move our homes. Right now, people who own these homes have little to no rights once they put them on rental property. Our reality with Haven Park Capital as the owners of the small piece of land where we live is this. They are more likely to evict even during a pandemic. There are more harsh rules and regulations with all kinds of penalties. They've cut back on all amenities and stripped value out of our communities. They are brutal absentee landlords whose new management promotes bullying, fear-mongering, and harassment. If you get behind on your lot rent, they can evict and quickly seize your home. They ordered us to remove yard toys like basketball hoops and wading pools, even when schools were closed during the pandemic. And there are many new fees like for our pets. As homeowners, we have the same upkeep, repairs, insurance, and property taxes as a stick-built home. The cost of moving a mobile home is $10,000 to $25,000. New residents in the Highwoods are paying $475 a month, plus the now uncoupled water, sewer, and trash removal. Before Haven Park, we paid $283 total. That's about an 86% increase for the dirt our homes sit on. It's hard to believe we could lose our homes and life savings to such uncaring, greedy people. We made a valiant effort in the midst of a pandemic to get protective laws passed in our Montana legislature. I thought, who wouldn't vote for fair treatment for seniors, veterans, and disabled folks? I thought we had good reason to ask for laws to secure a more level playing field. Senator Hoeven, who sponsored our bills, apologized and said he sincerely thought his colleagues would be as mad as he was about such unscrupulous greed. It was obvious from the start that we did not have even a slight chance in the present climate. Haven Park's past business practices have been openly questioned in state legislatures and Congress. They are questioning the misuse of Fannie Mae loans to fund these predatory private equity groups like Haven Park. They drain local communities of affordable housing and harm families using funding created during the New Deal to stimulate and sustain affordable housing. In 2019, Enterprise Community Partners received one of 5 national awards for their outstanding affordable housing work. 2 months later, their subsidiary Bellwether Enterprise provided funding to Haven Park to buy the 7 Montana parks, and whose thirst for profit is forcing us out of our once affordable homes. With the help of MH Action, we have met with Enterprise CEO and Vice President to tell them of the hardships Haven Park Enterprise have caused. Enterprise, whose mission statement is a lovely, affordable home and a vibrant community for everyone. Unfortunately, today, some of Enterprise's work are at odds with that vision, and they are fueling the fire to displace us from ours. 2 years later, and we have no fair lease and no way to fight back. What is hardest to live with is that I thought my home would preserve my memories and secure my future. Haven Park has taken that away. They are bleeding us dry because with few consumer protections, we now live with fear and uncertainty. I am including with my written testimony Fannie Mae's Duty to Serve from 2019, a solution to this huge injustice they described in their lease pad protections. Making this recommendation a requirement is all it would take. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Newman. Juan Cuellar is here from Hyattsville, Maryland. He's here with his translator, Trent Leon Learman. Mr. Cuellar, thank you very much for joining us.
You will speak and then pause, and then I will translate. So, senadores, mi nombre es Juan Cuellar, vivo en el complejo de Victoria Station en Hyattsville, Maryland. Desde el año 2000, con mi esposa y mis 3 hijos, somos parte del comité de inquilinos de Benford Victoria Station. Arbor y la familia de empresas del Arbor son propietarios de miles de apartamentos en el país. Nunca los hemos conocido o visto en los 10 años que han sido dueños de nuestros apartamentos. Senator, my name is Juan Cuellar, and I live in
Sheldon, we're having a hard time hearing.
Mr. Leon Learman, can you move closer to the microphone? We just really aren't able to hear you.
Okay. Senators, my name is Juan Cuellar, and I've lived in Victoria Station Complex in Hyattsville, Maryland since the year 2000 with my wife and 3 kids. I am part of the tenant committee of Bedford Victoria Station. Arbor and the family of companies of Arbor is the owner of thousands of apartments in the country. I have never known them or seen them in the 10 years they have owned our apartments. Entiendo que Arbor habla con hablan con los gerentes del complejo, que es con quien hablamos, solo los dueños. Gracias a la ayuda de casa de la organización que nos apoya, se esconden para que no sepamos con quién hablar. Incluso cuando hemos tratado de comunicarnos, nunca nos han respondido. Si necesitamos mantenimientos, hablamos con la secretaria de la sociedad gestora. Creo que a los propietarios no les importa las condiciones de estos apartamentos. Nosotros como inquilinos, ni siquiera los reporteros saben quiénes son. I understand that Arbor speaks to another company who speaks to the managers of the complex, which is who we speak with. I only learned of the owner because of the help of CASA, the organization that supports us. The owners hide so that we don't know who to talk with. Even when we have tried to reach out, they have never gotten back to us. If we need maintenance, we speak with the secretary of the management company. I believe that the owners do not care about the conditions of these apartments. Us as tenants and not even the reporters know who they are. La mayoría de los que vivimos aquí somos de Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras y casi todos somos inmigrantes. Los dueños piensan que por ser inmigrantes no somos importantes para ellos.
quieren que el dinero llegue todos los meses sin hacer nada por nosotros. Tenemos la necesidad de vivir en unos apartamentos, pero no vivir así.
The majority of us living here are from Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras, and almost all of us are immigrants. The owners think that because we are immigrants, we are not important. For them, they want the money to arrive every month without doing anything for us. We have the need to live in an apartment, but not live like this.
El techo de los pasillos de esta se están cayendo. El piso de madera se está pandeando. No tenemos calefacción. Hay cucarachas y ratones y más plagas. Y unidades de aire acondicionado no funcionan. Hay mucho. El refrigerador no funciona. No quieren arreglar nada, incluida la estufa, el refrigerador o el calentador, ni arreglar los pisos. Están dañados. Toda nuestra familia no es solo nuestra familia a la que están dañando, sino a todas las familias.
The ceilings in the hallways are falling in. The wood floor is buckling. We don't have heat. There are cockroaches and mice. The air conditioning units don't work. There is a lot of mold. The refrigerator doesn't work. They don't want to fix anything, including the stove, refrigerator, heater, or fix the floors. It is harming our entire family, and it is not just our family that is being harmed, but all of the families in the complex.
Además, han aumentado mucho el alquiler y ahora tenemos que pagar nuestra propia agua cuando antes no lo hacíamos. Ni siquiera recibimos recibos de calidad de agua que usamos. La empresa solo nos dice que tenemos que pagar lo que nos digan. Creo que tenemos plomo en nuestros edificios debido a las antigüedades de las infraestructuras. Aguas amarillas caen del techo.
Also, they have increased the rent, and now we have to pay our own water when before we did not have to. We don't even get receipts about how much the water is. The company just tells us that we have to pay what they tell us. I think we have lead in our building because of how old the infrastructure is, and the water that's coming from the ceiling is even yellow.
Estamos seguros de que las condiciones en las que vivimos han afectado a nuestra salud, porque no es higiénico, con todos los ratones y cucarachas, aunque siempre estamos fumigando. No podemos controlar. La compañía se ha beneficiado con más de $1 millón de asistencia de alquiler durante la pandemia, solo de nuestros complejos de apartamentos.
We are sure that the conditions we live in has affected our health because it is not hygienic with all of the mice and cockroaches. Even though we are always fumigating, we cannot control them. The company has benefited with more than $1 million from rental assistance during the pandemic from just our complex alone.
Cucarachas y falta de mantenimiento. No podemos seguir viviendo así. Después de más de 10 años, la empresa es rica, son millonarios. Siempre obtienen el dinero de nosotros, pero nunca vienen a ver cómo estamos o arreglan los apartamentos. Queremos que la empresa arregle todo y nos cobre más porque queremos seguir viviendo en este en este barrio. No podemos permitirnos más porque somos pobres. Gracias.
Arbor is responsible for all of the mice, cockroaches, and no maintenance. We cannot continue living like this after more than 10 years. The company is rich. They are millionaires. They always get money from us, but they never come and check on us or fix the apartments. We want the company to fix everything and not charge us more because we want to keep living in this neighborhood. We cannot afford more because we are poor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cuellar, for joining us, and Mr. Leon Learman, thank you for the good translation. Debbie Nunez is a mother and lifelong resident in Lower Nob Hill in San Francisco. Ms. Nunez, please speak to us. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Chairman Brown, senators, staff members, and fellow tenants around the country. My name is Debbie Nunez, and I'm very honored to be here this morning. I'm a lifelong resident of San Francisco and have lived in our 34-unit building at 1035 Sutter Street for 32 years. My daughter Katarina was born in October 1995 and has lived here all her life. It is most certainly my home and always will be. We have lived under 3 different owners, including the current corporation, Veritas Investments, San Francisco's largest landlord, and now one of the largest multifamily operators in California. When we first moved in, a local San Francisco family, the Bellins, owned the building. Communication was warm, responsive, there was genuine community. In 2000, the notorious Lemby family bought the building, along with hundreds of other rent-stabilized buildings, with thousands of long-term tenants living at affordable rents because of San Francisco rent control. Between 2003 and 2007, they spent more than $1 billion on apartment buildings, with much of that binge fueled by collateralized loans bundled by Wall Street banks. The Lembys then began a harsh campaign to displace long-term tenants like ourselves, and in the process raise rents to pay off the exorbitant loans they took out to buy the buildings. I remember the constant utility and water shutoffs during hazardous construction and demolition inside vacant apartments. Many nights, due to lack of hot water, I had to boil buckets of water to bathe my then young daughter and warmed up towels near the oven. Management, despite our multiple requests, refused to provide rent control. So on our own, we bought dozens of mouse traps. One night, I remember catching more than a dozen mice. I felt like a terrible mother. The Lemby strategy was harsh, crude, and reeked of utter harassment. It was blatant enough, though, to catch the attention of the San Francisco city attorney, who filed a lawsuit against the Lemby family. When the Great Recession hit, the Lembys went bankrupt, collapsing under the weight of loans they really never should have gotten, combined with lawsuits and tenants organizing to stay in their homes. Enter Veritas Investments. Yet Pang Ao founded Veritas in 2007. Mr. Ao spent over a year talking to the Lembys before closing a roughly $500 million deal for a chunk of that Lemby portfolio, including my building. Mr. Ao's time at Harvard Business School helped secure a crucial investor, the Bauhaus Group, one of the world's largest hedge funds founded by Harvard professors. Bauhaus provided 90% of the equity for at least a portion of the Lemby properties. Instead of relying mainly on bank debt like their forebears, Veritas has combined debt with equity with some of the largest investors in the world to fund this shopping spree. They include the private equity giant Carlyle Group and Ivanhoe Cambridge, the Montreal-based investor that has tens of billions of dollars in assets. In 6 years, and largely under the public's radar, Veritas went from owning fewer than 100 buildings to being San Francisco's largest residential landlord. Veritas and its investors now own more than 250 buildings, totaling more than 6,000 units, with properties now in Oakland, Alameda, and Los Angeles. Many of the acquisitions in LA happened during the pandemic. What does this all mean for tenants like ourselves in Katarina? Unlike Lemby's crude approach to forcing out tenants, Veritas is sophisticated and expert at exploiting legal loopholes. To raise rents on long-term rent-controlled tenants, they pass on the cost of cosmetic projects, resulting in double-digit increases because of largely aesthetic and exaggerated construction cost. When tenants are priced out, they gut the vacant units, tear down walls with haphazard regard for lead and asbestos protocols, water and utility shutoffs, downed elevators, and inconsistent noticing reduce tenants' quality of life. But their paperwork with the San Francisco Rent Board is largely on point. So the only thing that has ever really changed their business practice is public organizing and action by tenants as myself. I never wanted to make a stink about tough conditions. I wanted to work through things and survive. But when Veritas tried to raise my rent and my neighbor's rent by 10% because of construction costs that I believed to be fraudulent, that was it for me. I'm about to turn 65, and this is no joke. I joined the Veritas Tenants Association. I began organizing with my neighbors. I made phone calls to our Spanish-speaking tenants under Veritas, and just yesterday spoke to our local board of supervisors in support of groundbreaking legislation to legalize tenant unions. My neighbors and I, by the way, beat that 10% increase as well. So I am grateful for this roundtable today, for the senators who are taking these issues seriously, and for my fellow tenants sharing their stories. I send you solidarity from San Francisco. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Nunez, for your good insight. Stephen Frischmuth from Austin, Texas. Mr. Frischmuth, welcome. Good to see you.
Yes, good morning. Thank you very much for your interest. And I really appreciated your opening remarks. I'm going to steal them as my preamble.
That'll work.
My name is Stephen Frischmuth. I live at Creek's Edge Apartments in Austin, Texas. Creek's Edge is owned by Cooper Street Capital from Colorado. I live here on SSI and SSDI and was put here on a Section 8 voucher about a decade ago. At that time, the property was owned by the Mulholland Group, and it was more than half empty with doors gaping on empty, dark apartments, broken windows, and broken furniture heaped in the grass. Most of the complex had no hot water for over 2 years, and the city installed portable showers on the tennis court. But by this time, transients, junkies, and thieves and prostitutes began squatting here, and tenants were too scared to use those showers. The place had become dangerous. Already disabled, I got mugged 100 feet from my front door, robbed, and sent to the ER. Both HUD and I were paying the rent. The property never gained public nuisance or health hazard status, and it continued merrily collecting rent. A new city organization found me called BASTA, which stands for Building and Strengthening Tenant Action. Situated between legal aid and code compliance, BASTA facilitates tenant organizing. Creek's Edge formed a tenants association, and simpler said than done, the owners were convinced to sell the property. The current owners, Cooper Street Capital, did return the complex to habitability, but maintenance is shoddy and management is hostile, insulting, mendacious, and always voracious. Management contrived false and outrageous ledger balances against tenants, then illegally threatened to enter and attach any property that might cure this so-called debt. Management threatened evictions. They threatened to take kids' toys from the front porch and then fine the parents. They began charging $20 a month for each parking space, then hired a tow company to tow anyone with an expired parking sticker. They never give any receipts. They never put anything in writing. A year ago, in the aftermath of the blackout here in Texas, BASTA, the Creek's Edge Tenants Association, and the Workers' Defense Project organized potable water and boxed dinners for the tenants. Cooper Street management called the police to have this aid driven away. Currently, management seems intent on driving away Section 8 tenants and appears happy to threaten and torment even those with MHMR disabilities. In Texas, it's perfectly legal to torment the mentally ill for money. I suspect Cooper Street has filed for emergency funds for some tenants, perhaps repeatedly, without eradicating the fabricated balance. And there's no way to find out any of this, and I can only suppose this is what they've been up to. The families in my complex are now designated essential workers, and they need a renter's bill of rights. Of course, all renters deserve a fair lease, honest services, accurate record keeping, fair collections, good cause evictions, and habitable conditions. And it isn't too soon to push for universal rent control. I think rent here in Austin has increased by 40% in a year, 2 years, something outrageous. But no matter how high in the tower you might rent, after they're done with us poor folks, they will be coming for you. Renters here and across the country comprise the majority, and they might show appreciation to any tenants advocate out there who's willing to get us a few rights. And thank you again very much for your time.
Well said, Mr. Frischmuth. Thank you so much. Our last speaker is Ms. An Tu-Nguyen. She is a tenant leader in Brooklyn, New York. Ms. Tu-Nguyen, thank you very much, Ms. Nguyen, for joining us.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Brown, Senators, and Senate Committee on Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs staffers. Thanks for creating space for me to testify before you all today. My name is An Tu-Nguyen, and I live at 70 Prospect Park West in Brooklyn, New York, acquired in 2021 by a private equity firm, Greenbrook Partners. Greenbrook owns well over 100 multifamily buildings in New York City, purchased mostly during the COVID pandemic at over $400 million to date. They partner with other private equity groups, including the Carlyle Group, the world's second largest private equity firm, and NW1, a much smaller, though very ambitious London private equity firm focused on real estate. They are in turn financed by institutional investors like the Texas Permanent School Fund, the oldest and second largest sovereign wealth fund in the United States. I give this testimony as a longtime resident in a tight-knit community that's been deeply and negatively impacted by their actions, and I hope this will shed some light on the realities of private equity landlords, particularly in New York City real estate. I have lived in my apartment for over 12 years since I moved to New York in the depths of the Great Recession for work in 2009. When I first arrived, I bounced around from one sublet to another for almost an entire year until I found a beautiful home where I could put down roots, build community, and pursue my dreams. Many residents in our building have lived here for 30, 40, and 50 years. From all walks of life, cultures, and backgrounds, stable lives, and to their community. This is to me really what they mean.
I think we just lost you, Ms. Nguyen. Why don't you, well, she did turn off her video.
Rent and on time.
Keep your video off.
Over
that might help.
I have a roommate. Okay. Stop. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me? Oh. Can you hear me now?
Sure, turn off your video, and just try again if you would.
Yes, Yes, can you hear me now?
We can hear you now. We could.
Perfect. All right, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now. So.
Sorry, I have.
Yes.
Great. My internet here is Spectrum. It's not the best, but I'm going to work with what I've got. So let me get back to where I was. So I have paid my rent in full and on time every month that I have lived here for well over 12 years. with never a complaint or missed rent. And it hasn't been easy. Like many New Yorkers, I have roommates to make my market rent apartment affordable, and job transitions have meant that I've struggled with the bills at times. Today, I work for a small nonprofit that supports working people build economic opportunity by starting employee-owned small businesses. As a daughter of refugees and small business owners, I have devoted my career to help make New York City and our country a place of opportunity and inclusion for all, paying it forward to make the American dream accessible to everyone. None of this matters to Greenbrook Partners. They announced the purchase of our building on March 21st, 2021. One day later, on March 22nd, I received a notice to vacate in the midst of the ongoing COVID pandemic. You may ask, why would any landlord do this to a stable, long-term tenant? Private equity landlords are a different breed. Their goal is maximizing profit, not the stability that comes with a long-term tenant. I am a suboptimal tenant to them because they think they should be able to extract much more rent in order to maximize profit on their speculative investment. Greenbrook's investment strategy is to take advantage of housing markets that are in, quote, COVID-related distress, end quote, and quickly buy up multifamily assets from smaller landlords in the targeted area, effectively cornering the market. They use advantageous financing that regular homeowners would never be able to access in New York City. Once a building is acquired, Greenbrook pushes out the market rate tenants, both commercial and residential, remodels apartments whether they need it or not, and then re-rents the units at astronomical prices, raising rents by at least 50% to over 3 times or more what these units had previously been going for only months before in order to maximize profit. They engage in construction as harassment, beginning large-scale construction, often not properly permitted and without required safety precautions, to drive rent-stabilized tenants out. Greenbrook construction has been stopped by the City of New York on multiple occasions, with one tenant spending 4 days hospitalized for severe asthma related to construction dust, and myself and my roommates experiencing the total collapse of our bathroom ceiling due to demolition work on the floor above. In both cases, Greenbrook was extremely lucky that no one was permanently injured. This is a predatory model that destroys communities, fuels real estate speculation, and robs potential home buyers from being able to afford a home to purchase and set down roots. When maximizing profit at any cost is the outcome, externalities like families and communities do not factor into the equation. Greenbrook and their business model do not care if I or my neighbors become homeless. In fact, their business model makes that possibility incredibly likely. Greenbrook tenants like myself have formed the Greenbrook Tenants Coalition to fight back against the suspected illegal deregulation and overwhelming rent we've been charged through legal channels, advocacy, and tenant organizing. Not all tenants have been able to organize like this. More often than not, when we reach out to a Greenbrook building, we find we are too late and tenants have already left or are in the process of leaving. This is an ongoing tragedy that is devastating New York City. The actions of predatory firms like Greenbrook and its private equity landlord peers are why there are housing crises across the country, from New York City to Austin, Texas, where I used to live. It is reprehensible to threaten people's homes during unprecedented public health emergency, and private equity landlords like Greenbrook and Carlyle Group should be ashamed to do it. Senators, I urge you to take legal and regulatory steps to hold private equity landlords accountable for unethical and illegal practices and to curb the massive speculation that they are engaged in that's fueling the housing crisis, uprooting communities, and destroying the lives and livelihoods of families and small businesses across the country. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Nguyen. Thank all 7 of you for joining us. Your stories were really helpful. Obviously, the members of this committee want to help renters and residents across the country. We will work together to find federal, state, and local solutions to the problems you've explained today. Your stories from Mr. Nunez and Ms. Jones and Ms. Newman and Mr. Cuellar and Ms. Nunez and Mr. Frischmuth and Ms. Nguyen were all really helpful. That critical information that policymakers at all levels of government need to consider as we seek to make housing safe and secure and affordable across the country. So again, thank you, Senator Tester. Thank you for joining us and other senators on this call, but especially you as residents. And thanks for your courage for speaking up. Thanks for organizing in your own communities and making a difference. And what you have said to us will really matter. So I will call this meeting to an end, but thank you so much for joining us today. Best wishes to all of you. Thanks.